Hello, in this video we will discuss about the high blood glucose, that is the diabetes type 2. So in this way the diabetes type 1 is also involved in this mechanism, the high blood glucose, but here we will just understand about the diabetes mellitus 2. So here is the person which that's contain pancreas. Pancreas is responsible for the production of different hormones and enzymes. So this is the digestive system. When we will intake the food that go into the stomach and after this go into the duodenum. After the complete digestion of carbohydrate and protein, the amino acid conversion as fat will be moved into the blood circulatory system. And while stretching of the stomach wall will increase the glucagon like peptide 1. And on the other hand, here is the glucose present. This is increase the glucose in the bloodstream is known as the hyperglycemia. So this is the pancreas cell which that is contain a islet of Langerhans. They are play important role endocrinally, and the islet of Langerhans contain beta cell for insulin production, alpha cell for glucagon, delta cell for somatostatin for the growth of the beta cell and alpha cell. So somatostatin used for the anabolism. So here is you can see this is the one cell. I am drawing the bigger picture for understanding. So during the hyperglycemia, the glucose level will be shoot and the glucose level will be high. So the glut transporter channel 2 type 2, which that will be allowed to absorb without using insulin because it is the beta cell. So it is itself producing insulin. So the glucose will convert in the glycolysis to produce the ATP, and the increase of the ATP inside will lead to inhibit the potassium channel, get it off. So it means the uh, charges will be changed. In this way, the negative will be more inside because the efflux of the potassium will not. So here is the endoplasmic reticulum is also triggered by the releasing by the IP3 inositol triphosphate, which that is bind to IP3 sensitive calcium channel and efflux from the endoplasmic reticulum. And this both mechanism here the calcium will influx more due to the potassium will inhibit to outside. So here is the it will be insulin vesicle to export. Exocytosis will be occur. So here is the glucagon like peptide 1 is used for the IP3 pathway. So the insulin here is the IP3 pathway basically is the GLP-1 receptor, and this GLP-1 receptor bind with the ligand GLP-1 and to increase the IP3 which that is stimulate the endoplasmic reticulum for the efflux of the calcium. So here you can see, if you think about that, this is the insulin releasing to the bloodstream, so that is why it is known as the endocrine. So here is that there are many tissue, for example adipose tissue, liver tissue, hepatocyte and myocytes. This is the myofiber also, and glycogenesis will be occur in all type. And here the adipose tissue, which that is the lipogenesis will be occur when the glucose will move inside with the binding with the insulin receptor to increase the GLUT4 channel for influx of the glucose for the level decrease in the blood glucose level. So in this way here is mechanism is that here is the insulin receptor, and after this binding, after the binding the here is the GLUT channel vesicle are present in the cytoplasm. It will be triggered by the insulin binding receptor to trigger by there are different mechanism. We are not understanding the mechanism and their cellular pathway, but here you can see just it will be bind to GLUT4 channel with a plasma membrane, and that glucose will be move in flux, so move inside. So this is known as the influx of the glucose. Anyhow, if you want to another video about that, I will give the description in comment below in the description box. Alright. So here is the insulin resistance. This is the insulin resistance mean the insulin receptor will not working too much good. but sometime will work good during the fasting for the repairing, and that is why this is a glut channel vesicle will remain inside. Why? Because the insulin will not bind, and when insulin will not bind, it will not trigger to bind with the cytoplasm, oh sorry, plasma membrane. So glucose will not absorb because the glut channel are unavailable. So here is the type 2 diabetes which that will lead to hyperglycemia because the insulin resistance. So this is the insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is due to the age of individual and the food habit, the eating habit of the individual can be influenced the diabetes type 2. So anyhow, here is the no growth of cell because the insulin will not bind because the insulin is the anabolic hormone while the glucose will also not absorb. What that means and how to possible the little bit survivalship. So here the no growth of cell will lead to trigger the hypothalamus for getting the growth. So how it's possible? Here is the somatostatin hormone releasing factor released from the hypothalamus after the positive feedback of the non-growing cell. So after the non-growing cell will stimulate to hypothalamus to pituitary gland to produce a somatostatin. Somatostatin is also known as the growth hormone. So adenohypophysis will produce. And in this way, the major mechanism for you to understand the insulin when increase, so the growth hormone will be decreased. While when insulin will be decreased, so the growth hormone will be increased. But in this case, the passage of age, you can understand as well. The passage of age, the growth hormone will be decreased. But when we will fast, so the fasting also trigger that growth hormone because insulin will not produce too much because the insulin will produce but it will be not bind with the cell because the insulin resistance. So that is why the growth hormone will work. So when insulin will be decreased, so the growth hormone will increase. So important thing you should need to understand, this is the growth hormone. This is the alternate pathway of the insulin, but during the eating time for the diabetic person, growth hormone will not produce while the insulin produce too much is known as the hyperinsulinemia. And in this way, the basically the insulin for produce but not use, so the half life of the insulin, and in this way the pancreatic islet will be damaged also. So after this, here is the cell which that binding the growth hormone to phosphorylase cascade of phosphorylation of SH3 and SH2 dimer, and in this way separate is the monomer, and in this way the kinase enzyme used to stimulate the RAP and genus kinase, and on the other hand the genus kinase as well as the phospholipase C enzyme gamma, which that is also stimulates the RAS, MUC, and ERK. These all things will stimulate to transcribe the insulin like growth factor 1. Eventually, this insulin like growth factor binding protein will release and to enhance the autocrine ligand. So this is the autocrinally stimulate, and after this stimulation there are different mechanism which that is GLUT4 channel we produce, and this GLUT4 channel you should need to understand. This is the GLUT4 channel will be stimulated by this mechanism, but insulin receptor substrate are bind to trigger this GLUT4 channel. So remember about these things. This is the here is the metformin. Metformin is also used for the stimulation of the insulin like growth factor 1. So that is why the type 2 diabetic person can use the metformin. Anyhow, here is I am drawing the bigger picture for the pathophysiology. So here you can see this is the glucose inside the high. So this is the in the blood circulatory system, the extracellular matrix, and inside the cell is the intracellular matrix ICM, and extracellular matrix is the ECM, And in this way, here is you can see that there are a lot of protein are present in the blood circulatory system. But the major protein used for the osmolarity is the albumin for the retention of water as well as maintain the blood pressure. So here is albumin will be increased, and how it's possible. So in the glucose, in the glucose can be moved inside in the endothelial cell of the blood vessel without using insulin. So this is the one cells can move, and after this a low density lipoprotein. In this way, the reactive oxygen species will be produced, and the damage the endothelial cell due to the too much using of the glucose to produce ATP, and the free radical will be produced. After this, the water is also move into the basically the albumin due to the endothelial cell dysfunction will lead to albumin move into the extracellular fluid passing. So here is the pass on from the blood vessel, and in this way the water is also follow the albumin protein due to the negative charge of the albumin protein. And after this, the movement will lead to decrease the volume of the blood vessel. And after the volume of the blood vessel, here is the low density lipoprotein is also moved into the extracellular matrix after the movement to create the atherosclerosis, the coronary heart disease, and there are many. And loss of water due to albumin loss and lead to constrict the blood vessel, and increase the blood pressure will lead to cause heart attack also. But in this way, here is the retina. This the retina is used which that's contain rod and cone cell. Basically the rod and cone cell which that's contain a nervous system, the optic nerves. A rod and cone cell is used for the absorption of light and detection. So here is the neuron of the optic nerve, which that is the less oxygen will lead to angiogenesis. Why? Because the constriction of the blood vessel will decrease the oxygen to the cell. So the cell will be die, the neuron will be die, the optic nerves will be die. And on the other hand, the angiogenesis will be occur, but the constriction to eye blindness, because the angiogenesis will lead to further constriction of the blood vessel due to the glucose retention. So the glucose, when the angiogenesis will be occur, the endothelial cell will be used again glucose. So this will lead to blood leakage and the scar tissue formation. While here you can see this is the nephron, which does contain glomerulus. Glomerulus is also contain the thin vein and artery. So in this way, it is also constrict to the nephritic disease. So